So, what if the secret to being a great leader wasn't about what you do, but about what you see? In this explainer, we're going to dive into the timeless art of leading people. We'll be pulling from some ancient wisdom and mixing it with modern business strategy to uncover those hidden skills that, well, they separate the good leaders from the truly great ones. You can forget about the spreadsheets, the supply chains, all the quarterly reports for a second. Because at its very core, leadership is, and it always will be, about one thing: people. That's it. Understanding them is the absolute bedrock of all management. It's the real starting point for any leader worth their salt. But that leads to the million-dollar question, right? How do you actually see people for who they are? We're always told don't judge a book by its cover, but let's be honest, as a leader, you have to make judgments. So how do you look past that polished resume, past the confident smile, to see what's really going on underneath? Well, we're about to break down 4 pillars of exceptional leadership that are going to show you exactly how. All right, first up is pillar number 1, the art of insightful judgment. This is all about learning to see what everyone else misses. It's about figuring out a person's true character, not from what they say, but from the little clues they leave behind. Okay, check out this story. It's pretty wild. A woman is at a party, and she meets the CEO of her bank, and she notices just one tiny detail. His fingernails are perfectly manicured. To her, that was a massive red flag. She figured any leader this obsessed with something so trivial must be neglecting this serious business of the bank. So she went and withdrew her entire life savings. Just days later, the bank completely collapsed. What a brilliant and, for her, very profitable example of seeing the large in the small. And this ability to focus on the right details is just crucial. Take this ancient story. A prime minister is riding in his carriage and he passes a huge, chaotic street fight. He completely ignores it. But a little later, he sees a single ox on the side of the road, panting heavily. He immediately stops the carriage to investigate. Now why? Because a street fight, that's a minor issue for a subordinate to handle. But a panting ox in early spring? That could signal a serious climate problem that might threaten the entire kingdom's harvest. That is a problem for a leader. So how do you get people to show you who they really are? You can't just sit back and wait for it to happen, right? You've got to be proactive. And that's where something called the woodpecker strategy comes in. Think about it. A woodpecker doesn't just wait for bugs to crawl out of the wood. It actively taps and probes the tree to find them. As a leader, you've got to do the exact same thing with your people. You know, different situations reveal different parts of our character. Sure, you can ask direct questions to test someone's knowledge, but to really test their integrity, give them control over some money. You want to see their courage? Give them a high-stakes, difficult task. How do they handle pressure? What about temptation? These are the kinds of active tests that reveal the real person hiding behind the public face. All right, on to our second pillar, using people unconventionally. So once you can see their true talents, the very next step is having the courage to use them, even in ways that break the rules. It's not about forcing square pegs into round holes. It's about finding that unique spot where their specific, weird talents can absolutely thrive. You know who really got this? Honda. This quote was their core belief. They just knew that game-changing innovation doesn't come from people who just conform. Nope. It comes from people with a unique personality, a totally different way of seeing the world. And that philosophy drove their entire recruitment strategy. Honda literally went out and actively looked for mavericks. They were on the hunt for 2 types of people: the fanatics, the ones who were just completely obsessed with the product, and the eccentrics, the ones with wild ideas. Honda's whole approach was simple: give these unique individuals a really high goal, and then just get out of the way and let them work their magic. Okay, hiring an eccentric engineer is one thing, but what if you took this principle to its absolute logical extreme? Would you, as a leader, dare to give the most important job in your organization to your greatest enemy? Because that's exactly what Duke Huan of Qi did. His rival's top advisor, a guy named Guanzhong, once shot an arrow at him in the middle of a battle. Yet after winning the throne, Duke Huan recognized Guanzhong's incredible talent and his fierce loyalty, so he put the personal grudge aside, made his would-be assassin his prime minister, and together they turned the state of Qi into an absolute superpower. Now that is unconventional leadership. So, you've found the talent, you've given them a place to shine. Great. Now for the third pillar: retaining people. And this isn't about fancy parks or ping pong tables. It's about creating a real environment of shared purpose, shared sacrifice, and psychological safety. Back in the 70s, during a really bad recession, HP could have just laid a bunch of people off like everyone else. But they chose a totally different path. Everyone, and I mean everyone, from the CEO down to the person on the factory floor, took a small pay cut and worked fewer hours. The message was so powerful. We are all in this together. And the result? Unwavering loyalty and a company that just skyrocketed when the economy recovered. And the cost of not building that kind of loyalty, it's staggering. Seriously, the employee turnover rate in typical American companies is 4 to 8 times higher than in Japanese companies that really prioritize stability. Just think about that. That is a massive, massive drain on knowledge, training, and momentum. A senior manager once made a $10 million mistake. Ouch. He walked into the chairman's office totally ready to be fired on the spot, but the chairman's response was legendary. He just said, "Why would I fire him? We just spent $10 million on his education." He completely reframed a colossal failure as a valuable lesson, an investment in his manager's future growth. And look, Steve Jobs got this. You simply cannot demand constant innovation and then punish every failure. It doesn't work. To keep your best people, you have to create a space where it is safe to fail. That feeling, that psychological safety, that is the absolute key. And all of this brings us to our fourth and final pillar, which is honestly the most crucial one of all, the leader's character. Because after you've learned to see people, use them, and retain them, the ultimate leadership tool is, well, it's you. Your own character, your integrity, your humility. Can you imagine this choice? Appoint your own son to lead the company you built from the ground up, or choose an outsider who you know is more qualified. That was the actual dilemma facing Thomas Watson Jr. at IBM. And in this incredible act of integrity, he chose the outsider. He put the company's future way ahead of his own family legacy. And that single decision earned him the absolute unwavering trust of his entire company. And that really highlights the difference between two types of leadership. On one hand, you have power. Power demands compliance, but it's always temporary. On the other hand, you have charisma, which is born from character. It inspires real commitment. It influences people's hearts, not just their actions, and its impact can last a lifetime. This image just says it all. In an experiment, a zookeeper in a lion costume, a perceived threat, ran at a group of chimpanzees. The alpha chimp, even though it was visibly terrified, grabbed a branch and stood its ground to protect the group. That is leadership. It's not about the absence of fear, it's about acting in spite of it for the good of the team. Your true character always, always comes out in a crisis. So, at the end of the day, the leader's character is the foundation for everything. Leading from the front, putting the organization first, acting with humility and fairness, these are the essential building blocks of trust. And without them, everything else just falls apart. Which leaves us with one final thought. Are great leaders just born that way, or are they made? Is character something you either have or you don't? Or is it something that's forged through practice? Well, the evidence suggests that while some people might have a natural knack for it, true leadership is an art. It's a skill that has to be cultivated. So the real question isn't whether you were born with it. The real question is, are you willing to do the work?